The War with Grandpa by Robert Kimmel Smith. Chapter 34. War's End. I couldn't believe I had slept peacefully through the rest of the night. But there was the time on my clock radio, 8:30 in the morning. I lay back in my bed and tried to listen to the house. There were stirrings from someplace downstairs. Mom was probably up by now. Saturday was her supermarket day. She usually took Dad along to help her, and Jenny and me if we wanted to go. She was in the kitchen now. I heard the sound of the pot cabinet under the stove slamming shut. She was probably beginning to prepare our Saturday morning breakfast of French toast or pancakes. I heard the water running in my parents' bathroom on the second floor. That meant Dad was up and washing. Then I heard what I'd been listening for. Uneven footsteps sounded on the stairs as Grandpa came limping up to see me. I waited. There was a knock on the door. "Come on in, Grandpa," I called out. The door opened and Grandpa was there. He had one hand covering his mouth, but his eyes looked awfully angry. He came into the room sideways, his face turned toward the window and away from me. "My feep are mippin'," he said. I stared at him. "What?" "My feep," he said. "You are my feep, aren't you?" I got out of bed. As I did that, Grandpa turned his back on me. "Oh, look at me," he said. It sounded like he was talking Pig Latin or some kind of weird language. "I don't understand you," I said. "My feep," shouted Grandpa. "If me ek my feep, u irmaba." Suddenly, the dawn came up in my brain. That's the way Grandpa spoke without his teeth. Amazing. And weird. "You're asking me to give your teeth back to you, right?" I said. Grandpa nodded his head, his hands still covering his mouth. "Well," I said, "you have to do something first." "Oh, my feep, I mean my feep." I translated that in my head. "You need your teeth, right? Everybody needs teeth. But we're fighting a war here, remember?" "Oh, Peter," he said. "Don't be that way, please." "Nope," I said. "War is war. Surrender right now, or I'll never, ever give back your teeth. I mean it." Grandpa turned his face toward me then, and there was such a sad look in his eyes, it almost made me want to cry. Without his teeth, his mouth looked all pushed in and wrinkled. He looked so old and helpless. Just seeing him standing there like that, a person I loved as much as anyone in the whole wide world, I felt about as low as a worm's belly button. I can't explain what happened next. All I can do is tell what I did. I ran down the hall to the closet where I'd hidden his teeth. Then I came back in a minute and handed them over, still wrapped so neat in those soft paper tissues. Grandpa took them and went into the bathroom, closing the door behind him. I heard the water running in the sink. Then Grandpa came out with his teeth back in his mouth, looking like my grandpa again. We stared at each other, not saying anything. I turned away from him and looked out the window. Across the street, Mr. Taub was mowing his lawn. "The war is over," I said. "I hope you'll forgive me for what I did. And if it makes you feel any better, I am so ashamed of myself. I could curl up in a ball and just disappear." "Oh, Peter," Grandpa said, sighing. Maybe this is how wars get started and just go on and on," I said. "Your enemy does something bad to you, so you do something worse to him. Then he gets you back, and you get him back, and the whole thing gets bigger and bigger and meaner, and in the end, someone drops a bomb. Isn't that the way it happens?" "Something like that," Grandpa said. "Well," I said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have taken your teeth." "It's my fault, too," Grandpa said. "Don't take it all on yourself, Petey." "I started it," I said. "And I let you," said Grandpa. "I'm the grown-up here. I should have known better. But you know what? I enjoyed it. It was kind of fun, and I think I needed something to get over my sadness." Grandpa came up behind me as I looked out the window. I felt his big hands on my shoulders, and then his arms grabbed me and hugged me to his chest. "All of us got off on the wrong foot," he said. "Your parents took your room away and shut you up, Pete. That was mistake number one. Just because you shut someone up, it doesn't mean his hurt has gone away. There should have been a family conference or something like that, including me. And we could have figured out where I was to stay. That causes a lot of wars too, Pete. Not talking. I'll get used to living up here, I said. I'm real sorry I took your room away, Grandpa said. But I'm not sorry you came to live with us, I said. Grandpa hugged me a little tight at that and kissed the top of my head. You're a real sweet kid, he said, but a hard guy to fight a war against. I still lost, I said. Yes, said Grandpa, but only by the skin of my teeth. Chapter 35, Bottoms Up. After breakfast that day, Mom and Dad and Jenny went off to the supermarket. I chose to stay home with Grandpa. He was sitting in the kitchen having his third cup of coffee. He looked like he was thinking hard. You know, he said, there has got to be another way for me to live here without taking your room away. Let's think on it, Petey. There's only so many rooms, I said. Right? I mean, you couldn't exactly live in the kitchen or in the dining room. Bunking in the living room is out, Grandpa said with a grin. Right, and the top floor is out because of your leg. 2 flights up is too much. And the porch would be cold in the winter, Grandpa said. That's silly, I said. Of course, he said. Besides, the paper boy and the milkman would keep waking me up every morning. Grandpa, be serious, I laughed. He ran a hand from the top of his face to the bottom and wiped off his smile. Okay, serious. What's left in this old house? The basement, I said, but Dad's office is down there. Say, that's right, Grandpa said. I'd kind of forgotten that. He fixed the basement up himself, didn't he? After Grandma and me had moved to Florida? It's kind of dingy, I said. Let's take a look. I opened the door to the basement, which was in the hall right off the kitchen, and Grandpa followed me down the stairs. I put on the lights. It's dark down here, I told Grandpa, because only one of the 3 ceiling lights works. Grandpa looked around the big room, peeking into the tiny bathroom. Not too promising, is it? He said. Dad's not a good fixer-upper, I said. That's why he's an accountant, Grandpa said. He took the stepladder Dad kept against the wall and set it up, then climbed up and poked away a ceiling panel to peek through the hole. These light fixtures weren't wired too good, he said, but the cable is fine. He climbed carefully down the ladder. Do me a favor, Pete, he said. Run on out to the garage and get me my big tape measure from out of my toolbox, would you please? I see I got scrap paper and a pencil right here on your dad's desk. When I brought the tape measure back to him, Grandpa was talking to himself. Heating ducts and plumbing are okay, and electricity can be pulled through. It's a start, anyway. Grandpa took the tape measure and began measuring the floor. I held the end down for him while he did the unrolling. All the time he was writing measurements on his scrap paper. Then he sat down at Dad's desk and made a sketch of the room. When he was finished, he turned the paper around so I could see it. I'm thinking about my own little apartment down here, Pete, he said. I think it could be real cozy. It's kind of dark, isn't it? I said. Well, I'd fix those lights and put in a couple of lamps. Some of these floor tiles are loose, Grandpa. I'd have some carpet put down. It'll warm up the place, too. The walls are yucky, I said. Paneling them will help. Make the place neat, too. And I would enlarge that little bathroom, put in a stall shower. There's a gas line over in the corner, you know. I figure I could put in a little stove and maybe hang a cabinet there. So sometimes I could cook some things on my own or make a cup of coffee down here. Sounds like a lot of work, I said. And that door leads out to the driveway, so I'd even have my own private entrance. I don't know, Grandpa, I said. It's a lot of work. Hey, Petey, he grinned. I used to build whole houses, remember? Why, one little apartment ought to be a snap. You'll help me some, won't you? You bet. Then it'll take no time at all, and maybe a little privacy for me and a lot more privacy for the rest of you is not a bad idea. Now all we have to do is convince your dad. It's his house, after all. I had a very bad thought. What if he says no, Grandpa? I don't think he will, Pete. But what if he does? Will we have to go to war with my dad? Grandpa threw his head back and laughed. That would be fun, wouldn't it? But no, Petey. No more wars. From now on, this family will talk everything out in the open. Peacefully, I hope. Chapter 36. Building the Peace. It didn't take very long to convince Dad about turning the basement office into Grandpa's new apartment. On the other hand, it wasn't as easy as I thought either. I know that Dad and Grandpa and Mom talked about it a lot, mostly when I wasn't around, but I managed to listen a few times from my secret spot under the stairs. Dad was worried about how much it was going to cost. Grandpa told him that he had money saved, and if I can't spend it on my daughter's house, making a place to live the rest of my life, where can I spend it? Dad seemed a lot more willing after that. But he was worried about losing his office. "You'll have your office upstairs in the guest room," Grandpa explained. "2 flights up mean nothing to you," Grandpa said, "but only 1 flight down means a lot to me." Dad surrendered after that, and the work began. Grandpa got these men who used to work for him in the old days to help. They mostly worked in the evenings. Moonlighting, Grandpa called it, though they kept the lights on all the time. And I helped a lot. Grandpa showed me how to bang in a nail, how to pull a wire through a wall, and how to watch out for electricity when you are putting up lights. What you don't want, he told me, is a shocking experience. It took a little more than 6 weeks to finish Grandpa's basement apartment, but when it was done, it looked beautiful. He had a nice brown rug on the floor, a stove to make coffee and things, and a new easy chair just to sit and relax in. Mom and Dad bought Grandpa a color TV of his own so he could watch his programs downstairs when we wanted to watch something else in the living room. And Grandpa's new little bathroom was so neat. One day, he even let me use his brand new shower stall. It was great. But the best day was when Grandpa and his friends finished moving all his furniture into the basement apartment. Because when they got everything in place, they went up to the top floor and moved all my things back into my old room. I helped them put all my stuff back in all the right places. I wanted my room to be exactly the way it was, not one thing different. I lined up the shoe boxes holding my baseball cards in the same spot they used to be, and I rehung my Hank Aaron poster right over the middle of my dresser. When everything was in place and Grandpa and his friends left, I lay down on my bed and thought for a while. I have to tell you, I had a smile on my face I just couldn't take off. I was back where I belonged, in my room where I'd always lived. It was like I had put on my favorite pair of flannel pajamas the first cold night in the fall. My room was comfortable, and it fit me. I belonged to it, and it to me again. And then I started to think about some other things, too. How you shouldn't always do what your friends tell you to do. They're not living your life. You are. And you have to decide what's right or wrong. While I was lying there, feeling the best I'd felt in a long while, I heard a loud banging noise on the outside of my door. I got up to look when Grandpa swung the door open. He had a hammer in his hands and 1 more nail to put in. "It's a little present I made for you," he said. He was hanging a wooden sign on my door that had the letters kind of burned into the wood. "Pete's Place," the sign said. I grabbed Grandpa and gave him a hug. "It's terrific," I said. "Thanks." He gave me his best smile. "You didn't lose your room, Pete," he said, "and you've gained a grandpa." Chapter 37. For my teacher. This last chapter is only for you, Mrs. Klein. I want to thank you for all the encouragement you gave me when I wanted to quit so many times, and for giving me so much extra time to finish, like the whole term. I think maybe when I grow up, I might be a writer. I got used to slipping upstairs into my dad's office to type a chapter every night after dinner. Some of the longer chapters took a week, and one of them took even longer. Mostly it was fun, but some of it was hard work. I felt so dumb sitting there when the words wouldn't come. But if you wait long enough and think hard enough, and your little sister keeps out of your hair, then you can do it. I learned that starting is the hardest part, and it gets easier as you go along. But the ending is making me a little sad. I'm thinking, what will I do tomorrow night instead of coming up here to work on my story? Maybe I'll have to start thinking about another story. Anyway, this is the true and real story of Peter Stokes and the war with his grandpa. I hope you like it. And I sure hope you don't take too much off for bad spelling and grammar.